QJ, we don't want to use the word league winner, but you're getting this sort
why
of production.
Not? Why not?
Why not league winner? Then?
Why not? I can see it. This is also like a feel good story. Like he got a lot of shit. He trashed on Twitter every week, and the tape wasn't good, and he, really blossomed into something special here. 4 weeks into the season, small sample, etc. But the power of Jim Harbaugh pep talks and belief, and it can make magic happen. Apparently, he's a mid-range wide receiver 1 for me this week in my rankings. Quenton freaking Johnston is a mid-range wide receiver 1. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Week 5 fantasy football, School of Scott fantasy football podcast. Theo Gremminger with Scott Barrett every week right here on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network and Fantasy Points YouTube. Scott, we are seeing a Drake Maye breakout right before our eyes. This was your Exodia quarterback that you were recommending everybody make part of their draft plans. There was a lot of people pounding the table for early quarterback throughout the pre-draft process, talking about that as a strategy. There were some other quarterbacks that you considered for your Exodia. Eventually, you fixated in on Drake Maye. A lot of the attributes that you discussed this summer are coming into fruition, and we haven't even seen the full story told in terms of the rushing opportunities. Your thoughts on Drake Maye and what you've seen in 4 games?
Yeah, well, he currently ranks 4th among all quarterbacks in fantasy points per game. He's behind only Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes. He was my Exodia quarterback, and in the Everything Report today, I said we're not even close to his final form. So I gave you a Yu-Gi-Oh reference mixed with a Dragon Ball Z reference. So super nerdy. But yeah, look at what he's doing. Look at the production we're seeing. And Jackson Dart has more design runs than Drake Maye. And so Graham and I kind of went back and forth arguing this. I think it's an inevitability that he is going to be running more because the coaching staff spent all offseason talking about getting him these design runs. There just hasn't been this real urgency, although he did score from a design run inside the 20-yard line last week. The big thing here is he looks incredible through the air. He's surpassing my expectations for him. You look at the offensive setup. This is an offensive line that ranks bottom 10 in pressure rate over expectation. This is a wide receiver room that doesn't have a single wide receiver ranking top 60 in AS. There's only 3 other teams that can say that, but completion percentage over expectation, accurate throw rate, catchable throw rate. He's top 3 in all 3 of those stats. He is balling out. He looks incredible. I think Brett can still be a little nitpicky from a real life NFL perspective. He is kind of taking sacks. His pressure to sack ratio is a little high, but he looks incredible. This is a great setup we just saw a 100-yard game from Stephon Diggs. If that's all at all real, he can take it to the next level or Maye even further. And like I said, yeah, he's barely using his legs. Of the top 8 quarterbacks by fantasy points per game, he's the only one who doesn't have 100 rushing yards, but he is this very talented, very skilled, dynamic runner. And so perhaps this week against the Bills, we could be looking at a 60-yard rushing game, a 70-yard rushing game. He showed us last year he could do that without the design runs, all scrambles. So it's really just another high floor quarterback with a high ceiling as well. And yeah, I'm feeling great about Drake Maye.
Yeah, he has 3 straight games with 2 touchdown passes. So I think there's a little bit more room to run there. Like you said, he's a very high scoring quarterback, but we haven't seen a week where he's had 300 passing yards. We haven't seen a week where he's had 50 rushing yards. So there's a lot of room to run there. 2 rushing scores. I'm sort of into it. And we still haven't seen Travion Henderson do much of anything. He's elevated Hunter Henry, certainly. Maybe this is a sign of things to come with Stephon Diggs. This is an offense that we had major concerns with. I think that we would give Josh McDaniels maybe a solid B+ for the job that he's done early in the year. Your vibes on New England as an offensive whole, you mentioned the lack of the average separation score from the New England wide receivers. Is your enthusiasm for Drake Maye, including potentially a buy low trade for any of the offensive skill position players to go around him?
Probably not, just because it's such a, I think, best case scenario still a spread the ball around offense. And none of these guys really excite me. I don't think they're all that talented. I think it's really just kind of Drake Maye putting them on their back. Maybe Diggs just based on pedigree and what he did last week, but even that, I'm not really buying it.
Yeah, I think that the actionable takeaway here is to go buy Drake Maye, because I think there's a lot of kind of indecision in the marketplace when you get into this low end QB1 territory. And I think there's still fantasy managers out there that might think they're actually selling high on Drake Maye. You have to remember, Drake Maye was drafted as a QB2 for almost the entire portion of the summer. We rarely saw him selected as a QB1. So this was a really, really good call by you, Scott. And you can find more information from Scott every single week over at fantasypoints.com. The Everything Report is the article that we're really going over throughout this entire podcast. We do it each and every week because the article is so information packed. The stuff you hear on School of Scott is just a slice of what's available in the Everything Report. It's Scott, it's Ryan Heath, it's appointment reading. And if you want access to it every single week, subscribe to Fantasy Points. You can use the code Theo for 15% off. Scott, you talked about some big picture
stuff. If I could just make a sales pitch too. We have the best projections in the industry right now, at least tracking versus establish the run the sims, stochastic, the blitz. These are, the most prominent projections in the space for DFS, for prop betting, where you have more skin in the game, and we're tracking ourselves against the rest of the industry. And we have the most accurate projections right now. So if you want to play DFS, we are not anywhere near as popular. You're not going to see our projections in GPPs as often as you will ETR or the Blitz. But right now, this year, Chris Weck's second year as projections are in 2025, we currently have the best projections. I can keep you updated on that if you want to hit me up on Twitter 3 weeks from now, see if we're still in the lead. I'd be happy to tell you. But yeah, if you want the best projections, the best content, the best data, of course, we have the best projections. We have the best data that no one else has. Subscribe to Fantasy Points.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Chris. We're going to talk about Puka Nacua a little later on the show, but Chris had Puka Nacua well ahead of market. Had him very, very close to wide receiver 1. We had him at wide receiver 2 throughout the summer, very high up in our overall ranks. Your subscription to Fantasy Points, like Scott says, it's so many things that you just unlayer. We had an opportunity to record a Fantasy Football Daily episode with Graham Barfield and Ryan Heath. One of the things that I love on Fantasy Points is the rest of season rankings, where it's continually updated, where the rest of season rankings are such a great, valuable resource to you. Graham is constantly updating those with help from other members of the Fantasy Points team. Big shout out to Graham Barfield. There's just so much you get out of your Fantasy Points subscription. Also, all of the data that Scott and I are referencing on School of Scott here comes from Fantasy Points Data Suite. The code Theo works if you want to get one of those subscriptions as well. So anything to add on any cool features, Scott, anything we have in the works or anything you're proud of this season?
Yeah, I just like how the rest of season rankings work seamlessly with RAI. You can only access that if you have a Fantasy Points all-in subscription, but we just lowered the price on all of our subscriptions. You could use promo code Theo for an extra 15% off. But yeah, so you can just ask the AI. It's like, hey, who should I look to add off waivers this week? Hey, is this a fair trade? I have AJ Brown. Who should I be looking to target in a trade? And so it incorporates our current week projections. It incorporates our rest of season projections. It incorporates our content. And so we have a bunch of subscribers who are really just sitting there all day, just asking the AI a bunch of questions. And the answers are really good. Like it's really impressed me, and I found utility with it as well. So yeah, shout out to Ball Knowledge, Fantasy Points own fantasy football AI.
Love it. Yeah, shout out to the entire team. We are absolutely crushing it this year. I had another question for you, but now you got me thinking AJ Brown, and I know you talked about him in the Everything Report. What on earth are you doing with AJ Brown? I know you talked about him being a hold, sort of a bet on talent. Is this a reaction to just not getting a lot out of AJ Brown? You'd be selling him low, or do you have hope that this thing is going to turn around? There's a lot of fantasy football anger right now at Kevin Patullo. He's not quite a household name where he's become like a villain on podcasts, but the things he's doing to the passing volume in Philadelphia, not exactly fantasy friendly. We're sort of longing for the days of Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I kind of wish you didn't ask me about this because this was a player I wrote like 12 sentences on it, and I read it back and I was just like, I don't know if I'm giving anything actual here, but it was a nice little vent session from me, and I'm sure his owners felt, commiserated with me reading it, but yeah, it's rough. And Kevin Patullo does deserve a good chunk of the blame. I was criticizing his offense after week 2. It just looked bad. Not a lot of motion, not a lot of play action. Didn't like how he was using AJ Brown. And you look at what's going on with AJ Brown, you can't even criticize, he's not getting the ball enough. I mean, you can, but he over the last 3 weeks, he ranks second behind only Puka Nacua in target share. And still, he has only one game over 30 yards this year. The one thing I can tell you is he is one of the best wide receivers in football. And like, I really don't trust, I don't see any way this doesn't change. He did have that cryptic tweet right after the game that everyone, drew it, was talking about. It's like, oh, okay, now the wheel is sufficiently squeaky. I don't know. I'm kind of hoping he just goes full a-hole, right? It's just, wins don't matter anymore. AJ needs the ball. Get AJ the ball. I need my 100. I don't think he's that kind of person and player. But if you own him, I think you're kind of rooting he was.
Yeah, I think that my takeaway with Patullo and the Eagles is the game where they had to have a comeback victory, they completely leaned on AJ Brown in that, and that was their best win of the season, was against the LA Rams.
Well,
and that's sort of
the other thing. It's like they don't really need him. He has under 30 yards in 3 of 4 games. Saquon Barkley has under 3.4 yards per carry in 3 of 4 games, and they're still 4-0. They're undefeated.
Yeah, I mean,
I want him to be a diva. I like my wide receivers to be a diva. Demand a trade to a team with a good quarterback, a bad defense, bad pass catchers, and let's go crazy.
How about to the New England Patriots with Drake May? Put AJ Brown with Drake May to the moon. That would make total sense.
And from a real life NFL perspective, I would trade 2 firsts for AJ Brown. Are you kidding me? For your young, dynamic quarterback who looks incredible, get him a wide receiver. That would elevate your team. That's a 10-win team. Patriots with AJ Brown.
Yeah, Patriots with AJ Brown would be super, super dangerous. And just the way that they're running offense. Now, I don't think Philadelphia is going to do anything of the sort. Obviously the Super Bowl last year, they have Super Bowl aspirations. I just think they're setting themselves up for a potential big loss in the NFL playoffs with this sort of antiquated style.
Yeah.
And again, we're only 1 month into the season, but I wouldn't want to have to go up against like the Detroit Lions in the NFL playoffs with the way they're trying to run offense. And all of a sudden you're down 14 points and you're like, okay, we're going to flip the script. Doesn't always work like that if you don't do things at least more often during the regular season. It's very hard to just change gears and change your style. We've seen it before, but it doesn't always work. But what is the new meta in the NFL with this wide receiver scoring?
Yeah, so there's the new rule change with the kickoff. You see this playing out where league wide yards per game, we're down about 20 yards per game versus recent seasons. Touchdown rate is going up. It's because offenses now have a better starting field position. So there's fewer yards you can actually gain to score a touchdown. And so you see this play out. You see this with the top 30 wide receivers. Now touchdowns are making up a higher percentage of their fantasy points. And so it sort of changes the archetype of player you want on your team. I think now we need to be prioritizing players with touchdown upside, players on good teams that that make frequent red zone trips and score points, score touchdowns. You want players who, have explosive plays, deep threats who can score on a 30-yard bomb, and quarterbacks similarly, or greedy quarterbacks who, like Patrick Mahomes historically, like Aaron Rodgers historically, who are very greedy inside the red zone. I think that's important. A certain caliber of receiver, a Davante Adams, a Drake London, who is a focal point inside the end zone, inside the red zone. I will say, the NFL is always changing, and you do see teams like the Rams and the Panthers who may have solved this kickoff thing with the knuckleball. So their opponents, their starting field position is a lot lower than everyone else. And so maybe more teams catch onto that, and every team has a kicker kicking knuckleballs. But yeah, right now it looks like Chris should be, when he's doing projections, placing a greater emphasis on touchdown scores. I hate this as a DFS player. It just, that's why I like DraftKings over FanDuel. There's just more variance because touchdowns are more random and fluky than yards and receptions. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm seeing this new NFL meta.
Yeah, let's talk about some actionable takeaways from this. What kind of quarterback is going to benefit from this new meta? You talked a little bit about the value of deep throwing quarterbacks who are taking shots. Who are a couple quarterbacks who sort of fit the bill here?
Yeah, Baker Mayfield is one, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. You can just go to the Fantasy Points data suite, advanced passing, deep throw percentage. That's a pretty good gauge. You could also look for explosive plays. So these players all get a bump. I don't think this is, super significant, not really a tremendous needle mover, but it's something that adds up. And for me as a DFS guy, it is something I'm going to start paying more attention to. It's DraftKings now looks a little bit more like FanDuel than in years past.
Should we be valuing end zone targets even more than maybe in years past with sort of this new meta?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's one of our best stats. End zone target share is another thing. If you go to advanced receiving, you can just scroll to the right and you'll see the top receivers by end zone targets. Davante Adams has 9, George Pickens has 9, and then I don't think anyone else is over 6 or over 7. So there is a clear gap right now between those two receivers and everyone else.
Yeah, I think Davante Adams, we talked about a little bit last week. We're going to unpack a little bit with George Pickens. Very interesting stuff in the Everything Report. When it comes to Adams, where are you projecting him, and what would you consider giving up for him? I know it's a hard, nuanced question. I could kind of give you a scenario here, but we like Davante Adams more than most. We have him at 8 overall in our NFL rest of season rankings at the wide receiver position. So we're a little bit higher than others. Like, for instance, would you trade a Garrett Wilson to get a Davante Adams?
Yeah, so I think I would. It feels like with Garrett Wilson, I just don't trust it. 3 seasons in the NFL before this one, in each of those seasons, he ranked top 7 in targets and outside of the top 30 wide receivers in fantasy points per game. And I don't see this offense being significantly better than any of the Jets offenses in years past. So to me, he's more of a high-end wide receiver 2, mid-range wide receiver 2, rather than the top 6 wide receiver we see by fantasy points per game right now. But no, I love our ranking on Davante Adams. I don't love that he is a 33-year-old wide receiver with a hamstring injury. But heading into last week, he led all wide receivers in ass. He had this tremendous role where he was leading all wide receivers in red zone XFP per game. He had the downfield role in this offense. He just was seeing 50% of his XFP was uncatchable, whereas Puka's was 19%. That was due to regress. It was really just, he was running bad on variance, but the role, the volume, incredible. We've seen this 4 weeks now. Every single week, Puka Adams combining for a 60 to 75% target share, first read share, which is just incredible. Again, I do worry about this hamstring a little bit. I think that played a role in Puka's back-to-back 15 target games, but the player, the role when healthy, I think is incredible. And the offense, the Rams offense looks awesome. I really like a lot of the changes they've made, incorporating more under center play action, more 12 personnel. But yeah, the usage, the utilization, the deployment, the efficiency, the ass, it's all great.
Yeah, and let's stick with the Rams a little bit, because Puka Nacua, we talked about him last week as our clear-cut wide receiver one overall. We've been sort of pounding the table for this one, Scott, and he follows up a 15-target week with another 15-target week. I mean, this is absolutely unbelievable. You now have 1 month of this with Puka Nacua putting up these sort of numbers. Where would you compare 2025 Puka Nacua to 2021 Cooper Kupp? And again, we have a long way to go, but things are sort of lining up where he could have about as many fantasy points scored. Is there potential he could even outscore him?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he's just a more talented player. I think this offense is humming. My comp, I know that was your comp, but I thought it was a great one. My comp is like 2025, 2023, 2019 Christian McCaffrey, just because the usage volume is just so incredible. And he's doing it with just one receiving touchdown. He's been top 6 among all wide receivers in fantasy points all 4 weeks. Only one receiving touchdown on the year. That's Christian McCaffrey, like where you're getting the highest floor in the game. Bad weeks without a touchdown, he's a lock to finish top 6. And then weeks with a touchdown, he's guaranteed to be number 1. I do worry about this sort of declining and Adams gaining a little ground, but no, he's the overall wide receiver 1 in fantasy, and no one comes close. If you can guarantee me he stays healthy, I would trade ungodly things for him. I would trade, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown is like a number 2, right? I would trade Amon-Ra and Garrett Wilson for Puka if you could promise me all these guys stay healthy. And I think CMC is right there at the running back position. I think it's CMC and Puka, and then just a cosmic teardrop.
Yeah, I mean, we it's not hyperbole. It's 27.4 points per game in PPR. It's an unheard of number for a wide receiver. And it's been like clockwork, where if you get the wide receiver who leads the NFL in targets and leads all wide receivers in receptions, you have such a good chance of having the wide receiver 1 overall. And Puka has 50 targets right now through 4 games played, 42 receptions. He's at over 500 receiving yards. And like you said, it's only 1 receiving touchdown, but he did have that grown-ass man touchdown run a few weeks ago as well. So like they're getting him the ball in creative ways. Very, very interesting stuff. And I sort of caught myself when I was talking about the leading wide receiver in targets, because what we're seeing from Christian McCaffrey in terms of a target earner, he doesn't have the 50 targets that Puka Nacua does, but 43 targets through 4 weeks at the running back position for Christian McCaffrey. Scott, he's at 31 receptions. And the two of us were all over Devon Achane in the preseason, talking about Devon Achane and Devon Achane's chance to, catch 100 passes, to have this unbelievable receiving year. And Devon Achane, to his credit, is having a fantastic season. He's scored 16 points or more in every single week. Achane is definitely trending in the right direction to having a huge impact, but he has 12 fewer receptions than Christian McCaffrey right now. Achane led all receivers in receptions last year. Then you look at another challenger to the throne. Bijan Robinson has 270 receiving yards, huge production for him. He's got 35 fewer receiving yards. McCaffrey has 2 touchdown catches already. It's unbelievable. Talk about Christian McCaffrey. We don't want to talk about him too much, but we sort of have to mention just how incredible this usage is.
Yeah. So just as a receiver, throwing out his carries, and he ranks top 5 in carries, he ranks top 3 in red zone carries. Just as a receiver, he would rank as the wide receiver 7. It's more than Justin Jefferson. It's more than JSN. It's more than Calvin Ridley, Travis Hunter, and Matthew Golden combined. He needs like 50 more rushing yards, but on pace for 957 rushing yards, 1,297 receiving yards. So this would be the fourth 1K season in NFL history. And he is one of the other ones. It's just 1999 Marshall Faulk and 1985 Roger Craig. And he's just a monster. And, he's doing all this without a single rushing touchdown. By XFP per game, he's at 27.2. The next closest player in fantasy points data history was at 21.8. It's absolutely insane. And so, if you can injury protect, if God turned off injuries for all players, I would trade ungodly sums for Puka and or Christian McCaffrey. This is one of my things. This is upside wins championships. This is power law players. And I think people underrate the impact of what we're seeing from CMC. By the way, with everything that could go wrong going wrong, not many red zone drives when you don't have your quarterback, you don't have your two wide receivers, you don't have your tight end. Things are going to get better. When you have these two guys, it's almost unquantifiable just how, like, it very well could be the case that Puka Nacua is more valuable than the wide receiver 2 and 3 and 4 combined. That's possible. And we saw that with 2019 Christian McCaffrey, where it was nearly impossible to win your championship without him. It was like the ESPN championship win rate that year for Christian McCaffrey teams was like 47%. It was almost a coin flip where, like, you just drafted CMC 102 that year, filled out the rest of your team with bye week guys. It was better than being, a great players at every position. Or you could have just been a taco with CMC, basically a coin flip to win their championship that year. So it's just, I'm in awe of it. I hope it sticks because I have heavy exposure to both players.
Yeah, you definitely do. We have Puka Nacua on 2 FFPC main event teams together. I've made some moves to get more Puka Nacua. I think Puka Nacua in Dynasty is either Dynasty wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 at this point. McCaffrey and Puka, though, from what Scott's saying, I think that this is the one psychological edge, and it's a big game theory discussion. And this show isn't really about trading per se, but if you're in a home league where trading is allowed in your redraft league, the 2-for-1 trade offer, like Scott said, there's really no 2-for-1 that you're going to say to us that, unless you're talking about something wild with like a out of nowhere, like a Bijan Robinson or one of these guys. But for instance, if I offer the manager with Christian McCaffrey, Omarion Hampton, and Breece Hall 2-for-1 for CMC, that's a trade that they should turn down every single time right now. And there are managers out there that look at it and say, no, I'm actually getting this edge because I get 2 starters there. Those fantasy managers are still going to exist, Scott. And those sort of trade offers are going to be possibly accepted. They might not get accepted after week 8, though, when CMC continues on this unbelievable stretch. So I really would take any running back sort of after the top 7 and combine him with any other running back inside of the top 20 and offer that package for CMC straight up and see if you're the manager rostering CMC would take it. So 2-for-1 trades, 3-for-2 trades. It's a tale as old as time. If you package it correctly, you can sometimes get those sort of trades accepted, and that can propel you to winning fantasy football championships. Do whatever you can to get Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey on your team. All right, Scott, let's talk about it a little bit. A guy who I like a little bit more than you do, Xavier Worthy, came back and was productive and also had impressive usage, led Kansas City in receiving yards, led Kansas City in rushing yards, led Kansas City in targets. Kansas City wins a big one. They beat Baltimore, a game where they really needed to win that one to get to 2-2. Rashee Rice is like right around the corner at this point. We're in week 5. We can see Rice returning soon. Another interesting change for Kansas City is we saw a little bit of increased usage for Brashard Smith. My question to you would be, is this the time to trade for Patrick Mahomes? You're all in on Rashee Rice. We're seeing this embrace of a more pass-happy Kansas City Chiefs team. They're really failing to establish the run, and we've got a lot of pieces here that we like. The presence of Rice also makes Worthy into sort of a really appealing wide receiver too, at least for fantasy perspective. There's a lot of pieces here in Kansas City where second half of the year Mahomes could be a really, really strong asset to roster.
Yeah. The defense has regressed, which has been a thorn in his side the past few years, where it was just a little too easy, to win these games. But the defense has regressed. They're 2-2. I was a big Xavier Worthy hater. Things look good last week. Career high receiving yards in the regular season for him, despite a disintegrated shoulder or whatever it is. And then you have Rashee Rice coming back, where he's really the focal point. He's like the entirety of the offense. But without him through 4 games, you saw in the 2 losses, Mahomes, like when Josh Allen needs to be Superman, he is Superman. And that's where you get these 45-point games. In Kansas City, the 2 losses needed Mahomes to be Superman. He had over 55 rushing yards and a score in both of those games. The Giants game was an easy win, but then last week against the Ravens, threw for 4 touchdowns, nearly 300 yards. I was pretty low on Mahomes coming into the year, and not my ranking, but just not a player I'm trying to draft. But I'm certainly more bullish than I was.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And I think we talked about this a little bit. Make sure you tune in to Fantasy Football Daily. We expanded on this a little bit in terms of trade targets with Graham and Ryan. Really, really fun show. But I just think everything's sort of setting up for Kansas City. They're a little bit under the radar. People were ready to bury them after the very slow start. The Philly game was incredibly ugly, and it feels like the Baltimore game was a real step in the right direction. So I'm very much in on Mahomes. 4 passing touchdowns last week. And now when we get back Rashee Rice, everything could click. So I'm very much into it. It's going to be a way more fantasy-friendly Kansas City Chiefs than we have seen in years past. We talked a little bit about your apprehension with Garrett Wilson. Let's talk about a couple of other wide receivers who are off to really, really strong starts in terms of fantasy scoring. Let's start out with one who's heading into his bye week, and that's Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze is currently the wide receiver 3 overall, averaging nearly 20 points per game. He has 5 touchdown catches, which is second in the NFL, trailing only Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God. What are your takeaways for Odunze during his big year 2 breakout season?
Yeah, I just think this is real. I think it's awesome. I think he's really talented. He currently leads all players in separation win rate against man coverage. The usage, the volume has been great. We kind of thought this was going to be, a very spread the ball around offense, but that hasn't been the case. Rome is clearly Caleb's guy, and they have a good chemistry and rapport. He's top 12 in first read target share. He's top 5 in fantasy points per game. He's top 5 in XFP per game. I do think you're going to start to see the rookies more involved following this bye week. Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, but I really think that's just going to kneecap DJ Moore. I think maybe Odunze comes down a little bit, but I think he's just too talented. This connection's working. So I am really buying into him as a fantasy wide receiver 1.
Yeah, Odunze is everything we thought he was going to be when he was drafted in the top 10 overall. It was a player that was very disappointing in year 1, but yeah, this year 2 breakout, it's real. It seems sustainable. And I don't think a ascension of Loveland or Burden I agree with you completely. I don't think either one of those guys would affect Odunze at all. Odunze at the end of the season might end up with 13, 14 touchdown catches, and I think he will finish as a wide receiver 1. Let's go with the player directly behind him. Just like we told you all summer long, Quenton Johnston is going to be a top 5 wide receiver after week 4. No, we didn't say that at all. But here we are. Quenton Johnston is 2023 Nico Collins. That's my new QJ take. I traded for QJ last week. The price of a brick keeps going up, but I'm going to try to buy a little bit more. I said this on another show to you, Scott, but if QJ would have just gotten injured in August before his rookie season and didn't play one single snap during that rookie year, and then had the exact same year 2 like he did last year, and then we're seeing this sort of ascension, I think the market would be much, much higher for him. So it's almost like people were too punitive on a rookie struggling out the gate, when if we look back historically in fantasy football, you've seen a ton of wide receivers break out in year 3. Davante Adams, Nico Collins. There's so many historically, but it's been like we've been too demanding of young players right out the gate. I think it's a little bit of a lesson learned for guys with this sort of draft capital to sort of not give up, to buy low. But that being said, where are we at on QJ? Another really, really strong week. 37 targets through 3 weeks. He scored at least 14.9 points or more in every single week, and he is currently a top 5 scorer at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I like your Nico comp. Mine was 2020 Josh Allen, but like even that doesn't really work, where it's just like it's almost unprecedented. There's like almost no frame of reference where he's just like awful, arguably the worst wide receiver in football, awful, arguably bottom 5 wide receiver in football, and then elite. And like, that's what it is. Like, he's elite now, just judging by, like it's a small sample size, but like everything I know and like use and lean on to do my analysis is telling me he's elite. He's 70 receiving yards in all 4 games. Week 3, he faced off against Patrick Surtain's shadow coverage. He had 61 yards. That was the most Surtain has given up into his coverage in over 2 years. Surtain, by the way, just shadowed Jamar Chase, held him to guess how many yards? 8 yards for Jamar Chase, and Patrick and Quenton Johnston whooped him. It's really, and his volume keeps going up. Ladd McConkey's volume keeps going down. It's crazy. This was one of Coach Speak's got. So Coach Speak Index did an article for us where it was his flag plants, but really his flag plants were just the coach's flag plants. And we cut it off at 7, but I remember talking to him about getting QJ in there, where he's just like, it's really bizarre just how much Harbaugh is hyping up QJ. And I know that's just Harbaugh. Like, he hypes up everyone, but it's just like so over the top and every single day. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, the power of Jim Harbaugh pep talks and belief, and it can make magic happen. Apparently he's a mid-range wide receiver 1 for me this week in my rankings. Quenton freaking Johnston is a mid-range wide receiver 1. Keenan Allen is like, I don't know, high-end mid-range wide receiver 2. Ladd, pour one out, high-end wide receiver 3. QJ is a mid-range wide receiver 1 in my rankings this week. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, we go back to 2022. I believe this was the last game that Jim Harbaugh lost as Michigan's head coach. The following year, they, of course, won the national title. This was J.J. McCarthy's last loss as a Michigan quarterback, and it was QJ and TCU 51-45 upset. And people joked, Scott, at the time. They said, this is going to be a chance for QJ to get a breakout under this head coach that he obliterated. QJ had 6 catches for 163 yards and a touchdown against Michigan in that big upset. Of course, TCU got boat raced in the national title game, but they still had, it was one of the most entertaining games in the playoff history. So QJ and Harbaugh have had this connection. He smoked Harbaugh, and now he's smoking opposing teams for Harbaugh. I am absolutely buying into this one. The dynasty marketplace has not adjusted yet. I think if you're a dynasty manager, go get yourself some QJ. I talked to some really, really talented high-stakes managers in a couple of text message chains and whatnot, and there's some really smart people out there trying to play catch-up with their exposure to QJ because it's a player maybe they didn't roster, and they feel like it's going to come back and burn them. QJ, we don't want to use the word league winner, but you're getting this sort of production.
Why not?
Why not league winner? Though?
Why not? I can see it. This is also like a feel good story. Like he got a lot of shit. He trashed on Twitter every week, and the tape wasn't good, and really blossomed into something special here. 4 weeks into the season, small sample, etc. But this is awesome, and it's something I can relate to. I am not a linear growth guy. Like I can't explain it. It just is what it is. But like for me, if I start something, I am like the worst, and I'm going to be the worst a lot longer than everyone else. And then like just randomly one day I wake up everything clicks and I'm really good. Like if you ask, so JJ Zacharyson was my editor when I got my start writing fantasy football articles. I was his worst writer for a really long time. And then I just wrote one random article about Frank Gore. And he was like, he called me. He's like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is a masterpiece. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just like, it was so easy. And it's like, you finally get it. You finally get it now. But that's been like everything in my whole life. Like if I took guitar lessons, it would be 3 years. And the teacher would be like, you're worse than my 6-year-olds who joined like 4 months ago. But then just one day I'll just be able to play Led Zeppelin or something. I don't play the guitar, but you know what I mean? So yeah, good for QJ. Maybe he's just not a linear growth guy. Maybe it just all clicked one day.
Scott Barrett, a big advocate of the 10,000 hour rule, 10,000 hours to master anything. So maybe QJ put in that work between year 2 and year 3. Any way you cut it, if you have QJ on your roster, don't sell him. And if you're going to sell him, it better be for something that's excessively good, because you might be giving up. I think like at I think he's a 15 point per game guy or better moving forward. And there's a chance that he puts up some really big spike weeks. So very much into the QJ breakout. Let's talk about another player that we need to unpack here, and that's George Pickens. Pickens is right now your wide receiver 6 overall in the season. And in the week 1, he was completely invisible. People were making jokes about Pickens as sort of, oh, here we go. This is the air yards guy. He has 4 targets. He scored. He only had 3 catches against Philly for 30 yards. Then weeks 2 and week 3, it was so weird. He had 9 targets, 5 catches, and 68 yards and a touchdown in back-to-back weeks. Then CeeDee Lamb goes down. And we sort of talked about this a little bit, where Jake Ferguson taking a big step forward, George Pickens, we both thought would get more usage, but I think you were a little more into Ferguson. Ferguson, you look absolutely correct on this one. But Pickens, we see what a spike week game looks like for Pickens. This was an unbelievable game for fantasy football, a 40-40 game in overtime. Green Bay and Dallas, this was supposed to be low scoring. Instead, we get this amazing shootout. And Pickens ends the game with 8 catches, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns on 11 targets. This was awesome. And now we're hearing quotes like Dallas wants to re-sign him, give him the bag. George Pickens week, Scott, unpack it. Is this a start of an unbelievable year for George Pickens? And I'll remind you the streak. We've had several years in a row where a wide receiver gets traded and finishes as a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, this is one I sort of struggle with. I dumped all over him on this episode last week. During this game, you tweeted out something like, oh, dude, George Pickens is awesome. He's like one of the best picks you could have made in whatever round he was drafted in, which is like clearly right. Like he was going next to Calvin Ridley and Devonta Smith, who was wrong. But I had some like snarky comment back, kind of like dumping all over Pickens. I don't know what it is. He just drives. I think it's because I tried to make him my in-season Exodia last year. You know, weeks 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm like, he's elite. And then it never happened. And so like, I'm still like bitter and butthurt over that. But yeah, so I had this snarky comment back to you. And then like people were like, what? This seems like off base for you or whatever. I'm like, all right. So I deleted it. And then he went crazy. Like within the next 3 minutes, you know, he went from, you know, a typical George Pickens game, which is like 568-1, and he added another, 50 yards and a touchdown on top of it. And so everyone dogpiled me. He's like, oh, you deleted, you coward. And it's like, you're never going to believe me, but I deleted it before he went off. So technically, whatever. This doesn't endear me to anyone or sound good, but yeah. So I'm kind of capitulating, but I'm going back and forth on it. So I just want you guys to hear out how I'm thinking of George Pickens. Any film expert you talk to, I actually haven't talked to Brett about it, but Greg Cassell, a number of Patrick Peterson, a number of former quarterbacks and NFL players, they talk about this guy like he's a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL. That's what Greg Cassell has been saying for years. They are drawing the comparison to Justin Jefferson, and the arguments in favor of him on top of that are, this is what you've been beating this drum since the offseason. The 2025 Dallas Cowboys are the 2024 Cincinnati Bengals. That is just so true. They have a really bad defense. They have a really accurate quarterback. They're going to lean pass heavy. So it's a great offense to be invested in. We just talked about the new NFL meta, touchdowns being more important. He scores a lot of touchdowns, leads the league in end zone targets. So that seems sticky to me. And so this is the pro George Pickens argument. The argument against is I think he's a better in real life player than fantasy player. I don't think he's a complete receiver, or at the very least, he's never been a high end target earner. Without CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson out targets him. With CeeDee Lamb, he was the wide receiver 62 by target share. And so that's not great. One thing he does really well is he makes these wow catches. In the fantasy points data suite, we call them hero catches. We also call them hero throws. PFF calls them big time throws. But he led the league in hero catches last year. I'm pretty sure he leads the league again this year. He does that. It comes out to like 2.5 wow catches, sick highlight reel worthy catches per month. That's not really valuable for fantasy. It's not really that consistent. You can't really bank on it, but it sticks in the back of your mind because it is so cool, because it is rare. But it's not as valuable for fantasy as Jake Ferguson being a PPR skin. Like Ferguson is not as talented of a player as Pickens. He's not that talented in general. Like he's not winning routes. He's just like open. He's just running these short, shallow routes against finding the soft spot in zone, right? Like it's not that, but like he racks up these catches. And so I just don't know that I hear, Pickens is top 7. Pickens is Justin. I don't know that he has that target earning ability ultimately. And I really want to hear your thoughts on this because I feel like I'm losing my mind and I can't see things rationally anymore and might just have a bias against him. Is that he is wide receiver 18 in our rest of season rankings. You have CeeDee Lamb coming back in 2 to 3 weeks, capping his upside. And so I think that's fair. If you can get, it's currently top 6 in fantasy points per game. If you can get wide receiver 1 value, I would sell him. But how do you see it?
Yeah, so I think that if you could get Drake London for George Pickens coming off of this one, I'm making the deal.
Oh, well, he's a whole nother player I can't see things clearly and rationally with, and who I might just be having a rational hatred of. So we should.
Okay, so I'll give you a different one.
We're overdue for Drake London as well, but yeah, finish this on.
We'll do a different one. Okay, so if I can trade George Pickens coming off of his best game of the season with maybe something else to get Jackson Smith-Njigba coming off of his worst game of the season, I think that's the sort of pivot deal that I'd be willing to make. Again, I referenced this one, and a lot of the takes, I love podcasting with you and Ryan and guys who get like super analytical, and I'll go to the mattresses with analytical takes, but I think a lot of my takes that resonate with people are vibe-based takes. And we have this trend is your friend thing in fantasy where we talked about it this past offseason with Pickens, with DK Metcalf, where last year it was Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy gets traded, finishes as a low-end wide receiver 1. Counting stats, but he's still the wide receiver 12. Year before, DJ Moore in Chicago ends up wide receiver 6. Every single year, you see a wide receiver get traded and finishes as a wide receiver 1. Right now, the best bet for that would be George Pickens. Number 2, the CeeDee Lamb argument. I've been making it too when I'm talking about sort of dynasty stuff where CeeDee Lamb, you're not really going to hold the injury against him because he's going to come back. I think CeeDee Lamb's really pushing it. CeeDee Lamb wants to be on a field. It's a high ankle sprain. Should CeeDee Lamb sit out 6 weeks and get right? Yes. The problem being the Cowboys would be toast without CeeDee Lamb for a 6-week period. So I really do think that CeeDee Lamb is pushing himself to get back maybe a little bit early. That's why we didn't see him put on the injured reserve. So you have that one there. Then you have, Scott, maybe you were a year early on George Pickens. We talked about all the things that he was right, like off the radar, like on some of the metrics on fantasy points data, the air yard share, the first read rate, the target share. The only problem was it was an antiquated Arthur Smith offense that didn't support wide receiver 1 type scoring. So I think you were on him a year ago for the right reasons. It was just the wrong environment. Then you put George Pickens in Dallas, and it's the best offensive ecosystem that he's ever had in the NFL, and it's not even close. And you talked about, well, forget it, like the quarterback stuff, Dak Prescott versus anything that was behind center in Pittsburgh, talking about the offensive ecosystem there. Then you reference this year's Bengals where they can't stop anyone. I don't know. I think he could end up, you say wide receiver 18. I think that's probably a fair way to project him. It's probably the smart way to project him. It's probably right about where Chris would have him, where Graham would have him. But I think there's also a chance that it turns into like wide receiver 8. And the talk that we have about like Puka and Davante Adams, it could also end up being on a point per game basis. Lamb and Pickens both finishing as wide receiver 1s. Obviously, Lamb's not going to do what Puka's going to do, but you could have two pairs of teammates that are wide receiver 1 in terms of points per game. So I think everything's coming up. George Pickens. Then you have the contract motivation where he's going to get this he's going to be one of the highest paid wide receivers in the league a year from now at this point. And he's only 24. And he's only 24. But if Jerry doesn't pay him, think about the teams that would line up to sign a 24-year-old who, like you said,
guy who you could have got for nearly free 10 months ago because he's locker room poison. He's a head case. Yeah, I don't know. Here's a question for you.
10 teams will be lining up to sign him for Nico Collins or more money.
You're probably right. Fantasy football, who would you rather have, Emeka Egbuka or George Pickens rest of the season? The big tiebreaker for me is like who is trending up through the fantasy playoffs and who would be trending down.
Egbuka, because Egbuka, what he's done, we talk about the touchdown scoring. Egbuka this week, the game flow worked out very well for him. But Scott, this was the first week where there was really a lot of game planning. What's going to happen without Mike Evans? Egbuka had 10 targets. Egbuka caught a long touchdown. Egbuka has 5 touchdown catches through the start of the season. Egbuka's ridiculously good, and that's a really, really good one. But I think it's a slight edge to Egbuka. But I think both of them have a chance to finish as wide receiver 1 scorers this year. But if I could have one, it would be Egbuka. You talked about Baker Mayfield. This is Baker Mayfield's guy. Egbuka's second half of the year could just be automatic. And another litmus test would be who's going to be the higher drafted player in 2026. It's going to be Egbuka. Egbuka's going to be like the 18th overall pick. Pickens will probably be a 3rd rounder. So that's sort of the litmus test for me.
Yeah, that sounds good. Can we talk about Drake London then? Because
yes, let's talk about
the episode of School of Scott where Scott loses his mind. So Drake London finally went off last week, and the tweet I had, which was like an intentionally hater ass tweet. This is the way my brain works, and I think it's one of my edges in fantasy is like I only think in range of outcomes, and I only here's the worst criticism I can make, and then I can hype you up in the next breath to the best of my ability. And so that's how I think about players. That's how I think about fantasy. Here's my hater ass tweet following Drake London's 100-yard game. So Drake London, since the start of last season, only has 4 100-yard games. That's really not a lot for a player we were drafting in round 2, round 3. Here's every one of those games. The one, Mooney was inactive. The other, Mooney outscored Drake London, out-targeted Drake London. The other, Mooney hurt his hamstring in that game, which was last week. The other, Mooney hurt his shoulder. And then in 3 of those 4 games, the game had to go to overtime for London to get the 100. Not really. Atlanta actually barely touched the ball. I just thought it was funny that 3 of his 4 100-yard games went to overtime. And so excluding all of those games, there's no difference between Lundy and Mooney by yards per game. It's 57.8 versus 57.1. That is my hater-ass tweet. To counter that is that, well, Drake London picked up an AC joint sprain in week 1. Maybe that bothered him the last 2 weeks. Talked to one injury expert who said, sometimes you see, a player, a wide receiver be in decoy mode the next week following that injury, should be okay now. Maybe that's why he went off. You also saw his slot rate double this past week, which was a key point for me because that's where I was seeing all of his value was, why he broke out last year was because they moved him more to the slot, playing in this power slot role about 40% of the time and 45% of his targets. And then that just totally disappeared the first 3 weeks, but came back last week. And so I think you do a really good job of kind of just let me just kind of lose my mind here for a little bit. And then you're just like, well, yeah, he's not the dream of Drake London being the overall wide receiver one is no longer a possibility, but he could still be a low end wide receiver one. I feel like that's what I think you're going to say, and is probably right.
Yeah, when it comes to London, also just another trend with Atlanta that I think we should monitor is Michael Penix sort of the poor man's Jared Goff, where these indoor home environments, Atlanta's going to look really good, and every single road game, it's going to be like hold your breath. This could be the bad Michael Penix week. I talked about it in the waiver wire column that I write, and it's Penix. Like it seems like a real. And again, with Penix, we only have like 8 starts of him as a pro. But he seems like a quarterback who's much, much better at home. And we've seen it where Drake London has like 25 targets in his 2 games in Atlanta. Actually, I think I'm reading that one incorrectly. I'm just worried a little bit more about Penix here, where I think Penix, it's sort of going to be a mixed bag. When it comes to London, though, this was a big positive step in the right direction, where I think that coming out of the bye week, they're going to have really a team goal to hyper feature London and hyper feature Bijan Robinson, because those are the 2 things working well right now. We saw Kyle Pitts also with a decent game recently. So I don't know, Scott. For me, I think London, it is what it is. It's going to be like a game of Survivor where you're going to get through the season and you're going to say, look, London's ranked here. Look, London's ranked here. You get to the end of the year, he's going to be like wide receiver 8 overall. And people are going to be like, yeah, he didn't really give me that amazing edge when I drafted him. But if you drafted well around London, I think he can get you there. Is that sort of a cheap cop-out?
No, I like that. I also like your Penix take too. I wasn't on that. Like for DFS, we know never play Jared Goff on the road, never play CJ Stroud on the road. That's what the donkeys do. Us sharps, we play them at home if we do play them. And yeah, maybe you have to add Penix to the list. It's a small sample here, but 7 career starts. Last 3 at home combines for 923 passing yards. Yeah, last 3 on the road, 530 passing yards. So clearly a stark difference there. I don't really know what this is. Amari Cooper famously had like the most exaggerated home road splits. I said he like needed to have a sponsorship deal with Tempur-Pedic or something, like his home bed. And Ben Roethlisberger before that, which shout out to Johnny, a little un-PC here, but it turned out that Ben Roethlisberger had a porn addiction, and he also picked up a lingering tennis elbow injury towards the end of his career. So that may have played, he's away from his wife on the road in the hotel room, may have played a role. But yeah, you see it with Jared Goff, and I think the one thing I do know is, crowd noise plays a role. You heard Dan Campbell talking about this week 1, on the road, they run play action and motion less than they do at home. Why? Because crowd noise is a factor. It makes things a little bit more complicated to get the play out. And so that is something, you have to keep in mind. And I don't know why it would be Penix more so than most, but certainly could be the case that the data seems to bear that out.
Yeah, or maybe it's just indoor games. And I do know that when we come back, we'll get a real good litmus test for this, because coming out of a bye week, they're going to play the Buffalo Bills in Atlanta. So that's one where if we see another strong performance out of Penix against Buffalo in that home Mercedes-Benz Stadium environment, then I think that really is a trend that we should pay attention to. Scott, let's talk about you've got to talk about it. Let's talk about the New York Giants, because this is an emotional roller coaster for you as a Giants fan. The Cam Skattebo takeover, we talked about that last week. Skattebo, another big step forward. Giants win. Skattebo gets 25 carries. Jackson Dart, the scramble rate, the amount of times that they're using him on manufactured rushing attempts. Jackson Dart leads all quarterbacks in week 4 in rushing yardage and in rush attempts, and he finds the end zone. But of course, we lose Malik Neighbors. What's this offense going to look like? What are the actionable takeaways? Who's the Giants you want to add? What an emotional roller coaster day for Giants fans to have this hope and optimism, get this huge win, and then at the same time just feel sick to their stomachs about Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. But yeah, you have to be encouraged about Jackson Dart in a game where he lost his star receiver early on. And he also picked up a hamstring injury on the first drive of the third quarter. He looked unbelievable. Before that hamstring injury, 6 carries, 44 rushing yards, and a score in just 2 full quarters. So he was on pace for double that. Really gritty, really Baker Mayfield-esque performance. And I think this is going to be a hot take if you look at rankings across the industry, but I think he could be a low-end QB1. I loved your comp for him, which was Daniel Jones. What was it? The
2022 Daniel Jones.
22.
Now
he finished QB8 in fantasy points per game. He ran. And so, bullish on him. It's going to be a way more Cam Scatabo-centric offense now. So really bullish on him. But yeah, absolute heartbreaker for Giants fans, for Malik Neighbors owners. It doesn't get much worse than that. Malik Neighbors, he was my overall wide receiver too. And I think like he could have had another stinker last week and, still would have had him extremely highly.
Yeah, we have him on that main event team, and we had a huge win last week, and we're like 3rd or 4th in the league, really like in the mix to win it. And now we're going to have to scramble. So one door closes, one door opens. I guess we get a little bit of a boost with Jalen Waddle's going to be, he moved up to wide receiver 19 in our rest of season rankings at the wide receiver position, but you can't really overcompensate for Neighbors. Let me ask you quickly, because there are people listening to this with Wednesday night waivers. Theo Johnson, Darius Slayton, your interest level in those 2 players?
Theo Johnson, after Malik Neighbors went down, led the team in target share. So that's really interesting. To me, my lean is Darius Slayton, just because last year, and I know he's a different quarterback and everything, he averaged 11 targets per game. He averaged over 3 yards per route run in the 2 games Neighbors missed. It really seemed like, it's kind of stupid to say Darius Slayton in the Malik Neighbors role, but that's kind of what it was, even though this is a dramatically inferior player. So I'm going to be chasing that in DFS this week. He's super cheap. And if there is anyone fantasy viable on this offense besides Scatabo and Dart, and there probably isn't, I would guess it would be him.
Yeah, Slayton had that random 26-point week, and then it was followed up by 3 out of his 4 weeks where it was I forgot the exact week it happened, but it was like a 26-pointer. Then it was a slight setback, and then it was like a 14-pointer, an 11-pointer. I think that could be sustainable. I talked about this in my waiver wire article, where I think there's an outside chance that Darius Slayton has his highest point per game finish of his entire career. He had that really strong rookie year, and it's been sort of middling. He could be like a 12-point per game guy moving forward, which has some value to it. Wan'Dale Robinson, any interest in this one? Wan'Dale has had a big game a couple weeks ago with Russell Wilson. On paper, his target should trend up, or was that wasn't Jackson Dart? That's not necessarily what Dart's going to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm certainly a big Wan'Dale hater, but his role's been a lot better, a lot more valuable this year, seeing actual downfield opportunities. I could be. I'm like I said, I'm just, probably the world's biggest Wan'Dale hater, but it could happen.
Yeah, there you go. A big Wan'Dale endorsement from Scott Barrett. It's funny, Scott, we talked about each and every rookie running back on this show besides Ashton Jeanty. We've been waiting for a game like this. Jeanty has a 3-touchdown performance, goes wild, and Vegas wins a close one. Or excuse me, Vegas loses a close one. But for me, the fact that they leaned into Jeanty in this sort of environment was really telling. I think this is a sign of things to come. I said this in my recap show which you can watch on Fantasy Points YouTube and listen to on Fantasy Football Daily. But I had a little pushback against it where people said maybe this is a one-off. We can't necessarily expect Jeanty to take this next step. But why would Vegas sort of put this back in the bag? He looked fantastic. They had a really strong game plan, I think, using Jeanty in this situation. What are your thoughts on what you saw and what you think we see moving forward?
Yeah, well, it's twofold. One, the Raiders have one of the worst offensive lines in football, if not the worst. And this was like a rare, really good matchup for Jeanty and the Raiders because the Bears came into the week ranking dead last in adjusted yards before contact per attempt. What does that mean? It just means their defense is really bad against the run. And so, maybe against more middle of the pack defenses, you're not going to see the production you did. But the other flip side is Geno Smith has been awful. He's been bottom 3 by just about every advanced stat I typically use to gauge quarterback play. Last week, he threw 3 interceptions, had under 120 passing yards. It's only been done 6 times since 1990. So yeah, why wouldn't you just make this the Ashton Jeanty offense? Just, target him as many times as you can, give him as many handoffs as you can. And so I do think it's going to be somewhere in the middle there for Jeanty. And also, by the way, he brought back the Michael Myers stance. Maybe that had a psychological factor imposed on the defense and also gave Jeanty an extra pep in his step. I don't know, but he's now averaging, like 30 fantasy points per game in games he's done that. So yeah, you have to feel bullish. People were very much panicking, but it's also, I don't know that we're going to see this every week.
Yeah, again, I'm not like saying we're going to see this every week, but I do think it's the offensive focal point. It's them leaning into Jeanty as this volume guy. He's going to get there with volume, I think. And, we see what he can do in the sort of positive matchup. The receptions were sort of a little bit of a bonus. It's not like the target share is sustainable that we can expect him to score a bunch more receiving touchdowns, but he did show that he has it in his bag. And maybe they go back to the table and say, hey, maybe, targeting him a few more times is positive. So it's definitely a big positive week for Ashton Jeanty. Let's pivot over to the tight end position to sort of wrap it up. You've talked about for several weeks this Jake Ferguson thing. You talked about it a little bit earlier. We've talked about Trey McBride, who I think, Scott, if we were trying to pick the tight end 1 overall, my pick would be McBride. Probably would be your pick, I'm just guessing. After that, it's a little bit open landscape here. Talk briefly about your thoughts on Tyler Warren. The interesting takeaway is we had an 18-point scoring outburst from Warren, including a rushing touchdown. Where do you think fantasy managers should be valuing Warren for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think it's just Trey McBride and Brock Bowers ahead of him. He looks awesome. He looks exactly like, what you would have gauged based on his analytics profile, which is he looks like one of the 3 best tight end prospects of the past 15, 20 years. He looks like Brock Bowers Jr. He added another wrinkle to his game last week, something you saw from him in college. He scored the rushing touchdown. Looks like a clear focal point of the offense. I really like Tyler Warren. I think from his 263 receiving yards leads the position. It's the most ever by a rookie through his first 4 games. I think in Dynasty, it's him or Bowers. I think in redraft, it's him, Bowers, or McBride. And I think there's a chance, he finishes number 1 this year.
Yeah, so that's really interesting you said that. And if you're a dynasty manager, Scott, you're basically saying you're going to move Warren ahead of McBride in dynasty?
Oh yeah, is that
it's hot
take
too
spicy? Okay,
it's a little spicy. I think that it's sort of like these 2 guys were unflappable and no one could break into this top 2 tier. But yeah, I think for me, Warren tight end 3, McBride still ahead of him.
I'll give McBride the edge in tight end premium. I'll give him that.
There you go. I think Warren, what's interesting is, Jonathan Taylor had a touchdown called back. Daniel Jones has gotten so many rushing attempts around the goal line. He's been really effective with those ones. We just want to look out for, like, Warren having 6 rushing scores this year would be something that wouldn't be good for Jonathan Taylor and Daniel Jones, but it would be an absolute unbelievable cheat code. Brett Whitefield talked about it, when he came on the pod with us earlier this offseason about Warren's upside and sort of this, Taysom Hill-esque role. So really interesting one. Scott, let's wrap it up with this one. You talked about in the Everything Report 2 sort of under the radar tight ends. Darren Waller comes out and looked rejuvenated in Monday Night Football in their win over the Jets. And also Brenton Strange right now is probably the only receiver you can kind of bet on in Jacksonville week in, week out with the BTJ struggles. Talk about both of these guys.
Yeah, I think Brenton Strange is just Jacksonville's new Evan Ingram. I don't remember which podcast I talked about it, but I've been very critical of Trevor Lawrence locking on to his first read. It's just what he's done at the league's highest rate all throughout his career, and defenses are aware of this. So if he's not going to change, and I don't know why we should expect he will, he just needs players who are, open immediately. And to me, that sounds like an Evan Ingram type in Brenton Strange, who you spot him just 5 receiving yards. He's led the team in receiving yards 3 of 4 weeks thus far. His volume continues to climb. So yeah, I like him. I like him as, low end tight end 1 moving forward. And then Darren Waller, I think chances are he's a bust, right? But it's a gamble I want to make just because the upside's so high. He only ran 10 routes last week, but he saw 4 targets, 2 end zone targets, scored twice. You're not going to bank on that, but it's just, what are the odds he gets the Jonnu Smith role from last year? That was a super valuable role where over his last 8 games, Jonnu Smith was putting up mid-range wide receiver 1 numbers. And I think that's more on Mike McDaniel in the offense than it is on Jonnu Smith, a career journeyman. It was the role, a role that had him ranking top 6 in screen targets per game over that span. And so it's just, would Waller post-retirement being a thing be any less improbable than what Jonnu did last year? That totally caught us off guard. So that's a player in an FFPC league. I don't know how unowned he is right now, but I would be aggressive if he was out there.
Yeah, I wrote him up as one of my preferred tight end options this week in the waiver wire column that you can read over at Fantasy Points. But I'm excited to add him. I'm also excited to add Theo Johnson. I think Theo Johnson's probably a little bit more of a rest of season bet. Waller, because of his age, because of him missing some time in the past, it would be sort of smoke him while you got him type deal. Just take the points and as long as you can. But you bring up Jonnu Smith. I'll also bring up Zach Ertz, who was sort of left for dead by the community last year and then gave us a very usable 2024 season. Waller has some parallels there. So, hey, Waller's shooting rap videos in the parking lot in front of Dolphin Stadium. Like, the guy's feeling it right now, Scott. So Darren Waller looked really, really good. They targeted him early, so I'm buying in on it. Tyreek Hill done for the year. Tyreek Hill may be done for his entire career after that awful injury. So Miami's going to have to adjust really, really quickly. Achane, as much as he can handle. Jalen Waddle is going to get a bump up, but he hasn't certainly given us a whole lot of inspiration early in the season. And I think Waller and also Malik Washington, another name that I wrote up. I think Malik Washington's going to get those manufactured rush attempts, and he's going to be on the field a whole lot. I think Washington a little bit of a sleeper, especially in wide receiver heavy format. So really, really fun one. Scott, what else do you have going on this week?
I'd just segue into DFS for the latter half of the week. What about you, Theo?
Yeah, so Dynasty Life, and then I'm really happy about the episode that we recorded on Fantasy Football Daily. If you listen to School of Scott, go and support that one. It was Graham Barfield, Ryan Heath, and the two of us talking about our rest of the season rankings, adjustments, some risers, some fallers, some trade targets. If you like School of Scott, you'd really, really enjoy that episode. Working on the Dynasty Market Report, pour one out. I'm going to have to write about Malik Neighbors again. But yeah, we're just keeping on trucking. Really, really excited about the October that we have planned at Fantasy Points. And again, if you're in bad shape, if you're 1-3, if you need a bailout, if you need an edge to get you back, Fantasy Points has you covered. Check out all of our subscription offers. Check out Fantasy Points YouTube. Check out all of our podcasts. We're everywhere here, Scott, and we're going to help you crush your fantasy leagues this season.